Okay, so this is part 2 of the video where we're going to restore the Game Boy motherboard itself. Before we get into this though, I want to preface with you should test your Game Boy before you mod or do anything to it. If it's not working, that's kind of a different story, right? 9 times out of 10 though, you clean that power switch and she'll fire right back up. But assuming you have one working, before you get it to this state, you're going to get yourself a copy of the AGS Aging ROM. This is just a generic kind of knockoff that I repurposed to be my little test cart. And you're going to get that on the cartridge, and then you're going to let it run. It's going to go through its little test. That's totally normal what it just did. You can hear that little bloop. That's it saying your GBA is good. If there's some kind of problem with the memory, you look at the RAM, and you can probably Google the rest, frankly. I'm not a total expert on it, but once you did that once and it cleared, you're going to do it again, but this time you're going to hold down the shoulder buttons. As it boots up and you see this little screen right here, we're going to go to Option Program. Some other things of note is under Test, you'll find the flicker adjustment, which is great, and under the unit checker you'll find the little boundary boxes so you can check your screen alignment. We're not going there today though. We'll go to Option and then we get Key Input Test, and you're just going to run through this and make sure all your buttons fire. Obviously I know these work, but you want to take the extra time to test your buttons as well, because it's no fun spending all this time putting together a nice beautiful backlit Game Boy, you know, with the on-screen display and all that stuff, and then finding out you got a stupid problem, like one of the buttons doesn't work right, or, you know, something else isn't right with it. That just sucks. So to prevent that, do a little bit of work and get yourself a little testing set up. With that out of the way, we're going to restore this motherboard and then put it back in a similar Orange Spice Game Boy. So the list of things is we're going to clean the speaker, we're going to clean the button contacts. We're not going to replace this speaker. This is a good looking speaker. I don't see any pitting or anything. This is actually a really good condition speaker. They're almost always messed up, so that's nice to see. Like I said, the button contacts, we're going to take apart the shoulder buttons and we're going to clean those. Most of the time when you see button issues with these guys, it's the shoulder buttons, and you can save them, I don't know, about half the time by cleaning them. It's worth trying. Some of them are beyond repair, but it's so easy just to clean them. I'll show you how to do that. And then we'll also take apart the power switch and we will replace the electrolytic capacitors. We'll also, finally, we'll clean the cartridge slot as well. And that'll round off, not quite done. We're also going to clean the volume wheel, and we're going to clean the headphone jack as well. And that will round off our restoration with just about everything on this being scrubbed down. Let's see. Anything else to note? If you see any corrosion or anything around here, you're going to hit it with a little white vinegar. Let it bubble and then clean it. If your contacts look messed up, you can try buffing them. You could try a fiberglass pen. You could try like a little Scotch pad. You could try Brasso, very, very small amount of Brasso, but polish these contacts. Be super careful with Brasso. Don't use Brasso, like last resort. Okay. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into it. I like to start with the power switch. This is always a fun one. You don't need to add any solder to the power switch, but we are going to add a little bit of flux. I'll get my iron fired up here. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab a razor blade. This is a generic 1mm razor blade, and the goal is we're going to get it underneath this little shield here and use it to pry. And if you're lucky, you'll have a power switch that looks like this, where it's flat. If you're less lucky, you'll have one, let me see here. No, I don't have one handy right now. Darn. But if you're less lucky, you'll have a power switch lid with a little groove in it, which is fine. It's not the end of the world. You can still deal with it. The things to do differently, excuse me. Things to do differently is you don't want to put down a ton of pressure when you're reapplying it. You want to lay it down gently, and you do want to note that these are directional when they have the groove in them. One side will have like a little pin sticking up out of the top, and that's just something to make note of. So my iron is now at temperature, so let's go ahead and just carefully, you'll feel it hit that little groove, and you can slide it in. You'll be real careful. Did I mention to be careful? Normally this is where I would turn on my overhead fan, but I got a window open, so we'll probably okay. Make sure your tip is clean. And the other thing, sorry, before I do this, one more thing to be aware of is you want to be aware of that little guy right there. That's a little resistor, okay? And if you're not careful, you're going to take that off. And it's tiny. It is so freaking small. It's very difficult to replace. And the repercussion is if you do take it off, you won't be able to turn your Game Boy on and off within a certain period of time. So what that little resistor does is it drains the capacitors around it, which will allow the Game Boy to start back up. So what I'm saying is if you take off that little resistor, after you turn off your Game Boy, you won't be able to turn it back on for, I don't know, somewhere between 10 and 30 seconds. It'll be about that long if that resistor isn't there to drain the capacitors. Okay? So I think we've gotten all the hazards and mitigations out of the way. I'm using a flat tip. I'm just being cognizant of the location. I can get in there pretty precisely without really touching that little resistor. But, you know, you might be a little less lucky. Another thing to note is the grooved ones tend to give it more resistance, like this one. This is actually okay, though. I want to show it giving resistance. So if it gives you a ton of hassle, don't force this, okay? It's really important not to force this because it's just plastic underneath and you might lift the whole thing. But if you look, I don't know how well that's going to show, but if you look really carefully, you can see I've got one end of it up, okay? The other end's still soldered down, but I'm going to get a little pair of needle nose here and wedge under this left side. And then on the right, again, being very cognizant of the nearby components, I'm going to heat up that side and kind of pry under there and look at that. Okay, so that was kind of hanging on for dear life. And that happens, again, that happens a lot with the ones with a groove in them. They tend to cling. The SP ones tend to cling too. I feel like the end of it is curved in a bit. So it kind of naturally wants to do that. Okay, and then the other end always puts up way less of a fight. You can kind of push a little bit this way, and it'll come right up. Okay, so now we've got that switch off. Clean your tip, and you're going to very carefully and very respectfully take off this little wiper thing. Look at that, that's filthy in there. That is disgusting. So basically, you got a bunch of carbon buildup on the inside here, and over time, it's going to prevent these contacts from doing their job. These are the contacts that provide power to the whole system. It goes through the battery terminals, goes up to here to the regulator, goes over there. It powers the whole system. And when these 2 points can't make contact with each other, the power doesn't flow, right? So we're going to get some isopropyl, and we're going to soak everything. Just get in there. Just, yeah, why not? All right. And in the past, I have used a Q-tip, broke in 2 to clean, but thanks to Nally the Nerd, I got a good tip to really get in there and clean it deep. So with the Q-tip, I'm going to make a nice angle so I can get into the corners. All right, and that's a nice tool to have. But another really nice, cool tool to have is a little fiberglass pen. It's something like this here. It's like a little wire brush, and it's going to let me get in there and clean the inside really nicely without putting any like deep scratches in it. So you can get in there with like a pair of tweezers or something, but you're gonna mark up the inside, you know. You're gonna take off kind of the coating around it, and maybe that's fine, but I like to be a little non-intrusive if I can be. So look at that, you can see the contact pads really clearly now. There's a bunch of gunk in the corners, but that's what we're going to use the Q-tips for. Now for cleaning the wiper, you need to be real respectful with this guy. Like, you need to be meeting your significant other's parents for the first time kind of respectful. You dig me? Because this thing has this flimsy little metal contact on it that completes the circuit, and if anything bad happens to this, your whole project is toast. Okay, like, you're gonna have to replace this power switch. It's gonna be really not fun. Okay, I'm not trying to scare you out of doing this. I'm just saying that this is a part that you need to pay really close attention to, because this flimsy little part deserves your respect. Okay. What I'm doing is I'm applying pressure in the middle where it's at its weakest, and I'm just gently brushing the edge of the contacts. That's the most important part. And then I'm going to dunk it again, and we're going to hit it with the Q-tip. And again, like, what you want to really avoid happening is putting too much pressure on one side. That might cause the other to, like, flip out or get out of its little groove there. So I'm just kind of gently brushing over it. I hope that's fairly visible. And you see, now I can see the clear exposed contacts. I'm not going to worry too much about anything in the groove, because it's not actually making contact. And then I'm going to come and I'm going to gently pry up the edges just a little bit, just to keep them fresh. Okay, and then we're just going to get in here and finish up. I'm going to get all that crap out of the corners. There you go. Looking pretty good. Also want to make sure you clean the underside of the lid. But mainly it's a job of getting the gras-du out of this switch, so it'll be good for another 20 years. You know, Mako has a electronic switch that he made a video about. That seems like a pretty cool idea as well. And then I'm still pulling up stuff, so I'm just going to keep on trimming, kind of work my way until very little to nothing comes up. Not exactly the most glamorous thing to make a video about, but if you're trying to restore a Game Boy, power goes through here. This can affect audio quality. So many good things happen from cleaning your power switch. You really should be doing it. Like, I would say don't even mod unless you plan on cleaning this little guy. It's kind of the heart of the system. And then when I mount it back, I'm just going to be real careful. Again, careful. Meeting your in-laws for the first time. I'll never forget when I met my in-law, my father-in-law, the very first thing he said to me was, what are your intentions with my daughter? And he's a retired police officer now, so he kind of, he was like the dad on the porch with a shotgun kind of thing. That's the very first thing he said to me after I met him. And I was like 19. And I said, I'll let you know when I have some. And he kind of nodded. And that was that. Although I had a good moment when I like asked him if I could marry his daughter, because he's traditional. It's not like I would have not done it if he said no, but it was just, I like the guy. I wanted to show him some courtesy. I told him, I have intentions for your daughter. I want to marry her. Sorry, that was kind of a tangent there. So anyway, you carefully mount the switch in, the lid goes over top. The edges will bulge out a little bit, and that's okay. What you're going to do is you're going to apply a little bit of pressure right here on the edge, and then you're going to kind of push the metal back in with your soldering iron as it heats up. There should still be a little bit of flux left on the board, and the metal is generally pretty agreeable. Just kind of wipe it back and forth. Okay, and that's one side. And here's the other. I'm just kind of pushing in the metal so it retains that original shape it had. You can bend the middle down a bit if you want to. I don't generally find that to be necessary, but it doesn't hurt. Okay, and that's your power switch. I've got an external power supply here I'm going to hook up real quick, and we're going to test. Because you're going to see I have a little bit of a theme where I basically do something to the system and then I test. Because if something ever goes wrong at any one point in time, I've already done the process of elimination for myself. Cool. There you go. All right, so I got a boot. I know the power switch is good. So now we're going to move on to the next thing. What's that going to be, Brandon? I suppose we're going to recap the system now. And for recapping the system, I recommend a really good pair of Citizen Snips here. I've got kind of a thinner pair. It's a little more of a flush cut, but these only touch plastic. They're a little bit flimsier, a little bit thinner. Like I said, I want something meaty. I want my Citizen Snips right here. Okay. Basically the idea is you're going to cut parallel to the contacts, which are on the top and bottom, like where you see that little black stripe, it's oriented that way. And you can kind of start wherever, but I like to start with this guy and this guy so I can have all the room I need to take out the big guy, because that's easily the riskiest. And what I'm going to do is get in like as close to that black base as I can. I hope that looks okay on camera. And I'm going to snip it right off, holding my fingers on it so it doesn't go flying anywhere. Okay, and that leaves that little shiny mushroom kind of thing. And what I found is I can kind of bite into the side of it like that. And if you just gently wiggle, the rest of the cap comes off. Gross. Always remember to wash your hands after this, because caps that are starting to leak smell bad, and they leak out, you know, toxic stuff. And then there's still these two little nubbins sticking out that are going to prevent me from taking off the rest. So I'm just going to kind of gently get in there, snip them off. Okay. Man, that stinks. Game Gears are the absolute worst. It smells like a fish market every time you do one. And then generally that last little piece comes up. And then those are the two contact points. We're going to deal with those all at once later. I like to kind of do everything in big passes. So we'll go ahead and snip off the base of the little one now. And same as before, grab the edge and employ what I call the gentle wiggle. Wiggle it off, snip off the little bits right there, minding that little metal things are flying all over the place. Okay, and then you're ready for the big one. The big one is this is where people tend to lose traces. I can't guarantee it with this method of snipping. If you're really afraid with that, you can use soldering, you can use hot air, you can use a different method, and that's fine. I like cutting. It's fast. It's generally very safe. You only really run into issues when there's already some kind of corrosion on the board. And if if this makes you uncomfortable, that's okay. Like you don't have to recap these yet. But these caps, they have a lifespan of like 20 to 30 years, and the system's starting to come up on that. So I like to replace when I can. But technically, the DMG ones, they're still good, right? For the most part. But these are like the only things with an expiration date, basically. Whew. So you see there, it left the pad, but the little leg actually came off. If one of these rips, you just follow the trace and run a little jumper wire, and that's all you need to do. This one came close to being damaged or ripped. In that case, you could attach it right there. These are 2 negative points. But the point I wanted to make is, if this makes you uncomfortable, maybe practice on some broken stuff first, or use a different method, use a safer method. But the point I want to get across is you probably shouldn't do this unless you are at least familiar with the concept of how to repair trays. It's not nearly as risky as I'm probably making it out to be. I just, I work in safety, basically. That's my 9 to 5. So I'm always quick to call out stuff like that. All right, so now all the caps are off. The big one is important. It has a role in power. So if the big one isn't right, the system won't power on. And this one's sound, I believe, and I can't remember what the other 2 do. But you have multiple ways that you can deal with this. The bottom line, you need to get the legs off. We need to get the legs off, and we need to clean the contact pads, and then we can install new capacitors. So there's a couple different ways to get the legs off. You can put a little bit of flux on them, and that's generally enough. If you use rosin core flux, you can also do one of these deals. See, there's no leg left on that one. But you can start to apply pressure to the leg and just put just a little dab of solder on it, and that also introduces a little bit of flux, which is generally enough to get it off. Or sometimes you don't even need that. Sometimes it just comes right off, but generally a little bit of lube is recommended. And you definitely want to be running your overhead fan at this point. I'm doing this next to an open window, so I'll probably be okay. Okay, once again, minding the nearby components. Boom. Okay, all our legs are off. At this point, I'm going to get a little bit of solder wick. And I'm just going to remove the existing solder. The idea is it's easiest to apply to a flat surface, so we want to remove the old solder to create that flat surface. You could also say something about how the mixtures of really old solder and this new solder probably shouldn't mix, and I'd say you probably have a point. It smells a little assy. I hope I don't get cancer from this. But if you like this video, then it's all worth it. Kidding. I don't want to fucking cancer. Okay. Now, let's grab a Q-tip. Get some ISO on it. Let's get these bad boys clean, and we can go ahead and hit that little bit of leftover from the power switch. I like to do it all at once. And a lot of the times too, when you take off the big guy, it's a little more difficult than the others because they actually used adhesive on the underside as well. So expect a little more resistance when you do that one. Let's go over it multiple times, make sure I got everything. And then hit the power switch because I don't want to, there's a lot of flux on the power switch. I don't want to get flux all over it and then rub the flux everywhere, you know. All right. So now all the caps are off. That's looking pretty good. How well you can see those in the light, but those are looking nice and shiny and flat. We like it. Now let's go ahead and recap it. I got a console kit here. Sorry, I've got a GBA console kit here from Console 5. We need 2 of the little guys, 1 Big Daddy, and 1 normal one. No, I don't know the values off the top of my head. I know a lot of them are 100 UF. But if you get the kit from Console 5, you don't really need to know the values either. It's big guy to replace big guy, medium guy to replace medium guy, and then the two little ones for the two little ones. Those are exactly the same. So yeah, there's not a whole lot to it. There's a couple different ways to recap as well. But my favorite way is to just put down a little bit of flux. You need so little flux for this. Like seriously, like just kind of spread it around. Need barely any, because you don't want to make a big mess either. Okay. And then go ahead and stick your capacitor down into the flux. And at this point you can start soldering the ends, or what I like to do is flip it over here and just apply just a baby amount of solder to the leg. Just the ittiest bittiest amount, you know, just the smallest possible amount. Grab it with some tweezers. Oh man, where are my good ones? Oh, this is a travesty. I didn't think to have them out. Okay, I'll just use this set. The show must go on. So grab your best pair of tweezers, not my best pair, and go ahead and put a little solder on the end of your tip. Line up, look over it and line up the two ends so they're both inside the solder pads. Put down your dab, wait for it to follow the heat and glide over to the pad, and give it a quick stick. And we're going to go ahead and hit the other side here. Again, noting that solder wants to follow the heat, so you need to make the pad itself hot. So kind of angle yourself appropriately, and you'll see the solder go, you'll see it suck down the path you want to go. All right, that's one installed cap. Next is the medium boy. So we'll go ahead and get him dunked, flipped, and then if you want to be extra fancy, you can kind of set your solder up so it's standing up. That way you don't have to handle it. There we go. Again, you really don't need much, and you don't have to do it this way. I like knowing the solder is all the way down there, and then all you have to do really is connect the dots. Tack down. And you do want to be careful in here. Sometimes this tip is a little difficult to work with for this one, but generally it's enough. There we go. Make sure you clean your tip frequently. That's not just a tip for guys. Gals too should always be cleaning your tip. All right, and then we'll move on to the little one, moving right down the line. Pre-10. Swipe, swipe. Flip her back over. Line her up. Hope you guys don't mind the long form of this video. I do a lot of video editing and stuff for my job, and I just don't feel like editing all that much. I feel like modding Game Boys, you know what I mean? One thing I forgot to mention is to always double check your alignment. You'll see a plus and minus on the actual mark, and then if you look at the outline will actually match how the bottom is shaped. They do have a directional shape. There's a lot of little markers to kind of help you along. Spread that out a little bit. There we go. Okay. I want to do the back side first. I hope you're enjoying the gentle sounds of my cat cleaning itself. I know it puts me at ease, knowing that he's not getting into something. Because I know he's a little shithead. I love him. Okay. And now our system is recapped. We're going to take a second and we're going to clean up after ourselves. We did leave a little bit of flux on the board. And then it's really smooth sailing from here on out. It's really not so bad at all. That's looking good. Get in here. I mean, you weren't using a lot of flux in the first place, but I sleep better at night knowing that there's no more flux in your Game Boy. Or at least very little. And, you know, Nintendo leaves them. You see flux all the time, all over these shoulder buttons. And that's generally a big pain in the butt to remove, so I'll leave those alone, but nothing else is safe. All right. So now that we've done that, of course, the next step is to test it. I just did a big deal operation to the Game Boy, so we just want to double check. The work was clean. I don't really have any concerns about it working, but it helps. It helps later. Beautiful. The sound also got significantly louder just from that. I don't know if you remember, before it was fairly dim in terms of sound, and that just woke it up. I know one of these capacitors is directly responsible for powering the amp right here, so that probably helped. What's going to help as well is cleaning out the speaker. We're just going to take a Q-tip and some alcohol to that to make it nice and shiny. And occasionally you might see like little bits of grit sticking out from the copper wire right there. If you get that, grab yourself an old toothbrush. And I found with the bristles, you can generally get that out. And lots of people prefer the way these original speakers sound. They're fairly bright and crisp. And yeah, the sound, I mean, it sounds good. It sounds good for a little piece of plastic, you know? Nothing wrong with that. Okay, so now that's clean. All that's left for us now, we're going to hit the cart slot. I'll hit it more thoroughly than that, I promise. We're going to do the shoulder buttons and the button contacts and all that fun stuff. Okay, so for the cart slot, grab a generally clean looking toothbrush and just kind of brush out the contacts. If it's working, you don't really want to mess with it too much. Just kind of make sure there's no dirt or debris in there. And when you look down, you want to see that little gold shine from each one. I don't know how well you can see that on camera, but those look pretty good. If you really want to clean it really well, get yourself one of those little cartridges with a little rag thing on it. If you have an old game that you don't care about so much, you can isopropyl it really good and stick it in and out like 20 times. Me personally, I like something like this. It's just simple. I can replace the pads. You just slide it in and out a couple times and admire how much darker the little pad got. Okay, so got that pretty good. Another good thing to hit is this little switcheroni right here. Hopefully you can see that well, but this guy is the switch that tells the Game Boy to go into Game Boy Color mode. So we're just going to drop a little bit of ISO in there. Just a bit, like I'm not even squeezing the bottle. Just like a little bit from gravity gets in there. All right, I'm going to clean that switch out a little bit by doing that. The volume wheel is also pretty easy to clean out. Its contacts are on the inside of it right here. So with my little dropper, I'm just going to squirt some. And then we're going to articulate the switch for about 30 seconds. This generally helps with audio quality. Little bits of grime get in there, and this is all voltage based, right? So if it's not getting clean, consistent power, it can sound a little weird, a little choppy maybe. A little monotonous, but at the end of the day, we get a restored Game Boy. It's all worth it. Okay, and we'll go ahead and hit the headphone jack. I'm going to reach my old Sennheisers, and I'm going to drop a little bit of ISO in there, and we're just going to articulate it with a headphone. This isn't the most ideal headphone. It's like a little bit curved. You see that? But we just want to bust out any dirt. All right. Bed it up. Okay. We're looking pretty good, folks. I'm not going to bother testing after doing that. Hopefully that's kind of obvious. I didn't do anything too sensitive there. I'm looking around. I'm really bummed because I have a go-to set of tweezers for the next part I want to do, and I'm a little disappointed that I don't see them. So we're just going to have to improvise, I guess. That's okay. If you're like me, you have some tweezers that see flux and some that never ever touch flux. And I'm going to clean a set that sometimes sees flux because it's good and sturdy. I bought another set of tweezers as backup, and they're crap. They're just really bendy, really flimsy. You need something a bit harder for this. So basically, for these shoulder switches, there's a little black nub that sticks out, and when you press the switch, it pushes down on a contact, and that completes the circuit. That makes your button press. And basically, you want to get a grip on that little rubber stopper and pull it out, just like that. It just pulls right out. There's not a whole lot to it. And you kind of gentle wiggle it out. Man, some cat is having a crisis over there. I don't know what's going on. It's coming from outside. So I'm going to clean the little rubber stopper by just rotating it over a Q-tip. You know what? I am going to check. I'm going to check because it sounds like it's coming from right outside my back door. I'll be right back. All right. Kitty crisis averted. No, my cat's right here. All right, I was just making sure some cat wasn't like dying right outside my door. So we took off the stoppers, you gently rub them. Now we're going to go ahead and dunk ISO in here, basically until it fills up to the top. Where's that coming from? Whatever. All right, I've got a dirty tip here, so we're just going to quickly snap it off, so I don't want to get any dirt inside these shoulder buttons. Basically filled it to the brim with ISO, and then I'm just going to push down, up and down, articulate it for about 20 seconds or so. 10 to 20. For the first pass, I'm going to do about 10. Okay, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to slot it back, and I'm going to gently press it in on one side and kind of go around. I'm sorry, you probably can't see this very well on camera, but basically you kind of do a little 360 and then give it a couple more presses. Sorry, that wasn't super visible. I'll try to do this next one a bit better. But basically, you're going to choose which side you want to go down first. You're going to kind of tuck it in with your tweezers, and then you're going to go around the perimeter, just tucking the rubber inside the switch until you're 100% in, and then you're just going to push the buttons. Just push the buttons for about 30 seconds. Contemplate your life choices up to this point that led you here. Both of these buttons are fairly clicky. That's a good sign. Generally, if you can hear the tunk, 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 you're looking good. You can get tactile switches to put in here if you like a real short throw, really tactile kind of thing. Those feel great. I recommend them for anything aluminum, your boxy pixel builds. Really good for that. For the plastic though, these soft click ones are nice too. They just tend to, most of them have lost their click at this point. Or what happens a lot with these originals is one of them is like really clicky and the other one is muted. Okay. It's been our 30 seconds at this point. The very last thing we're going to do, I like to save it for last, because it needs to be the cleanest, is we're going to clean the button contacts. And I just want to show you really quick what two really nice OEM triggers should sound like. Those are some of the nicest OEM triggers that I found. I have a little like box of them, and most of them sound just a little muted like that. But those ones are like fresh. They're so fresh, I probably shouldn't have given them away. I should have kept them for myself. So for the button contacts, you can use a little bit of ISO. If you're feeling saucy, you can use some contact cleaner. This is Deoxit contact cleaner, which I'm going to use because I'm filming myself. And you always want to be your best possible self on camera, right? So a couple drops of the pink stuff. My little Kirby juice. And we're going to just gently rub these contacts. Because again, these contacts look great. I don't see anything wrong with these contacts at all. Going over each one really thoroughly. And then, yeah, there's nothing coming up. Looking good. Cool. And that's it. We have restored this Game Boy Advance. Yeah, so I think I'll go ahead and cut it off here. And for